No, but Stuart, I couldn't watch it because Loren didn't post it socially for like days.
I did. I put it live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality and Digital Marketing, show number 113. I'm coming from live from you from Atlanta. Holly's from Pahonix.
Where?
Pahonix.
Mr. Ed is from Orlando, and Mr. Robert Cole is from the big bright star of Dallas. Holly's from Signature Series Worldwide. Ed is from Flip2, and Robert is from Rock Cheetah. I thought I'd break it up just to make something different for you. And I'm from hospitality.marketing.com. Thank you for everyone for joining show number 113. And gosh, unfortunately, sad to say,
my mug. Look at my coffee mug.
Stuart's not even here to appreciate.
I know. It was totally for his benefit.
I tried to enhance my background a little bit, Mr. Ed, after you a couple of weeks ago made mention that we were slightly drab in the background. There's still more to come. I still have more backgrounds I want to share with you. I do. There are some backgrounds I want to share with you. So
I found this great picture of this guy riding a motorcycle in a pink tutu that I was thinking of sprucing up the place with.
Please do. It should be important that those things get shared. But anyway.
That's very sad that Loren knew exactly what you were talking about.
Immediately knew.
It wasn't a hypothetical. Yeah.
No, there's no hypothetical for those things. But I do have to say, and just as a moment of thought to this week, we are then again facing a senseless tragedy in a place that defines its business by travel. We're speaking of Las Vegas, and I know I threw it in as a topic of reference a week ago in relationship to the Puerto Rico and the weathers and so forth that were going on. But now we have an unfortunate tragedy again, and I know I may not be able to spend the entire time for the conversation, and it doesn't have to be our first conversation by any stretch, because there's some great topics that Robert, you had suggested and brought up. But how do we tackle how to market and how to get back to some normalcy for business of travel in a market that has been faced with this type of tragedy or crisis, post-crisis, post-tragedy? Of course, there's a rebuilding when it comes to the weather. There is a infrastructure requirement for aspects of those things. But from a marketing point of view, can we somehow hit the ideas of when is it the right time? Just as much as there is a death and a loss in a family, when is it the right time to feel that you can begin to act back to life? So,
it's pretty interesting. So I was talking to the guys at the Palm Beaches DMO. And so the Palm Beaches did not get hit by Irma as hard as other areas. So I don't think any other hotels were taken offline. There wasn't a substantial power loss. I mean, just landscaping damage. And, they were telling us, how they kind of wanted to be like really careful to not be insensitive. And I think this is an important thing. Is you have to realize that even something as simple as we're open could be seen by someone who is suffering as insensitive, right? And so the interesting thing they did was they hired a helicopter to just come and shoot the entire area from overhead. And that same day, so this was like 2 days after Irma came through, they hired a helicopter to go and shoot the whole thing. They had it live that day, and all they did was, it's the Palm Beaches right now. Like, that was the message. It was, and that's it. And they did that, with the thought of they weren't even going to keep it up for long. Like, they were going to, so it was the landing video of, Visit the Palm Beaches website. And then they just buried it in YouTube for anyone who wants to see it. But it was just date and time was like the only message, because they wanted to be sensitive to the fact that just because the tourist area of the Palm Beach is a really big market as far as land goes. It's like coast to Okeechobee and Boca Raton, like all the way up type thing. So just because the tourism areas weren't affected doesn't mean that there weren't people, like residents, like closer to Okeechobee, that didn't have flooding issues, things like that. And so I think the reason I wanted to bring up the story is like taking care in your messaging, and really thinking through why you're doing whatever you're doing from a marketing perspective, and making sure you're thinking through how are the people who are suffering going to take this. And if you can solve for messaging that won't really further antagonize the people who are suffering, regardless of what the situation is, natural disaster, shootings, things like that. These are the things you need to think about as a marketer in these types of times.
I would add to that from a more tactical or strategic point of view. Logistics. Adara, I want to call them out in particular because I thought it was very good taste what they did. I received a notification because I had no clients that have a Adara product that they were making sure that everyone understood that all targeting, all marketing related to affected markets were suspended. Mm-hmm. So that there was not any potential of showing up on websites promoting product within a market that, I mean, it may sound fundamental. It may sound, like duh, like hello, thank you, Mr. Obvious. But it is so easy to forget that we automate so many things, and retargeting and campaigns that have been pre-scheduled and so forth. Every hotel or every business needs to have a protocol of what to do. And first you suspend all these things. Like, let's evaluate what our positioning is. And then retool the message, to your point, at the right time, and what message that is has to be decided. So yeah,
we had to do the same thing. We had to shut off because we communicate post-stay with guests. Yeah. So, we suspended all of it and then went through, got in contact with all the properties and the different paths of Maria and Irma, and worked through, okay, what's the deal? Where are you at? What can we do? How do we help you? When do you need business? Because that's the other thing, like these hotels, like especially hotels in the Keys right now. So first of all, living in Florida, I can tell you, it wasn't as bad as CNN made it. Like, you have to understand, they find the best angle to make it look like the biggest disaster ever. From what we can see in the Keys, and Loren, I mean, you lived in the part that got pretty nasty side of it. I mean, would you agree that not everything was?
No. As a matter of fact, most of our comments are about the randomness of the distress, because one house could be totally destroyed in comparison to the house next door and untouched. There was damage, and there were people, and there are still people that are suffering through the process. And the Keys being one of the more primary places of this. But there needs to be it's not everything.
Yeah, it's not everything. Like, of all our clients in the Caribbean and in the Keys, which were the areas hit the hardest by these two that we had, the only hotel we work with that's like permanently damaged was in the Keys. Like, even our hotels in Puerto Rico, like they're not flattened, they're not destroyed. They're in a bad way. There's no question about that. But this creates a problem. This creates a problem for the Caribbean as a whole. This creates a problem for Florida as a whole, because the national thought is that, the Caribbean is a wasteland now, where in reality, a few islands were affected out of 32. It's hurting business in a much wider swath than the areas it affected. And then, the other side of it is a lot of these properties, well, they did get some form of damage. It was like quickly repairable damage, and they need to get back to business. So they're needing the world to know, like, travel again to this spot. It's not the brown smudge on the map that you think the Caribbean is because of the NASA images. It's not, that's not what's happening everywhere. So it's a challenge from a marketing perspective.
Yeah, Loren, coming off of what you said, from a B2C perspective, and you definitely have to be very, very considerate of the people who are distressed, and certainly groups that are targeting Puerto Rico to pull business to other islands, and you have to be very sensitive to that. But one way to do it is on the B2B side and looking at the travel agency community. When Hurricane Wilma hit Cancun, which was a Category 5, hit Cancun, was over it for 52 hours, right? I mean, just complete devastation. You had palm trees through guest rooms filled with sand. I mean, toilets filled with sand. Literally, people had to go through and, empty out the toilets of the sand so you could start getting things done. But what we did with Mark Travel, first we had 3,000 people in market. That's a whole problem logistically to get people out. The owner of Mark Travel, Bill Lamacchia Sr., probably spent $1 million of his own money. He didn't have to. He didn't go play the force majeure card. He's like, we're going in and getting them. got the planes and we got the folks out, number one. But then number two was we organized, it was basically a co-op campaign of all the resorts all throughout, basically Riviera Maya and Cancun, and Cozumel, and basically said, hey, we're open for business when they were ready, right? When really the destination was pretty much restored, the hotels were in perfect shape. We went out there, we did video initially, and basically said, hey, this is what it's like, so people can see this. A video is much, much more powerful than sending out press releases or us talking to people. But then we got everybody at I think it was Shelha, one of the main tourist sort of areas. They had an amphitheater. We had all the general managers and the staffs, and we did a live presentation. And I can't remember how many thousands of travel agents we had on it, but outrageously successful. And I mean, just stair-stepped the area coming back, because people were afraid. They had heard it had been just scraped off the face of the earth, and they weren't booking their vacation. And that's the worst thing, is if these places are ready to go and all of a sudden they lose an entire seasonal cycle, then that really cripples the destination. So but that worked very effectively. So yeah, the whole B2B side of activating the travel agency community for leisure travel is a big one, of how you educate it, and hopefully you can do it with the destination as a whole. Not a lot of the destination DMOs aren't as well organized as some of the groups down there, but also it was funded by a major tour operator who really, we pulled together all logistics, and that was 2005, 2006, so not quite the same prevalence of a video and the technology now, so it was a lot more expensive.
Not as much social either. I mean, I
think not at all.
Hotels have done a great job in their social, letting people know what's up, what's not, like, is it business as usual, things like that. That's been, I think, very helpful in dealing with that. Now, but Robert, I have a question. So that was the last time you were a tour operator, but how about when the Category 4 hurricane hit Galveston? What did you do for the people who were in Galveston back then? I mean, because that was very different. You didn't have computers. Motorized vehicles weren't around yet. I mean, so what did you do on that?
In the 1911 one?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, really, we used smoke signals. We found it was really, really very effective to do that. Carrier pigeons were outstanding.
Okay.
Unbelievable. Even with heavy weather. Yeah. So,
since I am speaking at Rocket here in Atlanta,
go ahead.
I was going to say, with Chris Crenshaw, he was interesting. He goes over stats. He tailors the data depending upon what we're sitting in, and we're talking. And one of the prevalent persistent pieces of data associated with Houston and Miami, going back to something you had asked about, Ed, is a dramatic decline. There is a projected decline, not only for Houston now, but into 18. And then he says that 19, it'll have an increase, but it's an increase because they're so low that anything's an improvement. It's not as if they've gotten better since now. Yeah, it's just the base has pushed down.
I'll give you a case study from the rental car industry. I wound up flying through Houston to come back to Dallas because I got bumped off a flight.
Are you still bitter about this car rental thing, Robert? Is this what it is?
No. I want to raise this. No, this is a different car rental thing. That was the gouging, the $400 to change the airport drop off in Washington D.C. This is the absolute antithesis of that. So I go and I rent a car from Houston Hobby, drop it off at DFW Airport, right? Just a one-day rental. What's the cheapest car? I got to get up there, and that was actually faster than connecting on flights, right? Just one of those things. Anyone venture a guess of the one-way car rental?
I can't talk to you about it because I saw your post. I saw your
$9.
I can't say.
It was, including taxes, $9.73. The daily rental was $5.66. Wow. Now, renting cars in Houston, the same car type, was $36. But when Alamo and these guys are willing to get their cars out of the market, going into a period of October, November, normally a peak business period, that is a very, very, very bad sign. Yeah, you can look at the car rental fleets and go, yikes, when you see that sort of thing.
I not for this show, but for another show to come, I've had quite an experience in Charlotte. I didn't realize that, it's race week coming up this weekend. And they're doing a lot of changes and so forth to it. But I didn't realize they yanked out 40,000 seats out of the stadium and tore out all the business skyboxes on the other half of the track. And the reason being is the demographics for their audience is changing. It's turning into an older group, and it's not being refilled with younger people interested in NASCAR.
It's an interesting problem that's happening to
lots of industries.
Yeah, NFL is another one of these things. I mean,
NFL,
but I want to bring that up in a future show because
golf.
Talking to the people in market, there's a more than growing concern about this because now they're grabbing at anything they can scrape at for it, and this convoluted reliance on this key pivotal event economically is substantial. And you're losing, and what's happening is the corporate is pulling out because the audiences that are being delivered aren't there anymore. So they don't have a reason to be spending all that money being in that space anymore, and they're going elsewhere. So it was kind of neat. I want to make sure it's like one of those things I was like, oh man, I want to throw in the show sometime because it really was a neat discussions I was having with them, and I know that you guys have some insights on it.
Well, I mean, look at what Daytona's doing. I mean, if you haven't followed it, but the Daytona Speedway is now hosting like major concerts and everything. To cope with this, and they're opening up to all sorts of other types of events now. Because like a market like Daytona is heavily reliant on the Daytona 500 and the other events,
Motorcycle Week, Bike Week and stuff like that all use the track, right? Yep. And they were even talking about the fact that they had to make a major decision on the broadcast coverage of this week's event. They changed it from Saturday night to Sunday day in the hopes they could change the demographics, and they went over and had a major decision as to whether to alter the display of the seats to reflect an audience that didn't exist. It was actually a discussion within the broadcasting of it as to whether or not they would superimpose audiences in empty bleachers.
Only if it's nothing but Hollies.
That is unbelievable.
That's not good. Well, no, when they built
and why
the
did Trump
Superdome,
do that at his inauguration then?
Right? I mean, then at least you can say I had the biggest ever.
Because you need the media in order to do something like that.
Yeah.
No, but when they built the Superdome in New Orleans, the patterns of the seats, they kind of have these different colored seats around. And at the time, the thing was so freaking big, they did that intentionally thinking, well, at least it'll look full. If a camera pans across, they'll see some variation in color.
Not 4K HD, it
won't. Not so much.
It's a real problem that's facing a lot of different industries where they were heavily reliant on the baby boomers as their customer base, and the younger groups aren't picking up these pastimes.
Nope.
They're
golf
is another one.
And one of the reasons is that the groups, these activities, be it ski or golf or whatever, the organizations who have them started pushing the margins so high, right? And to profiteer from it, they priced people out of the market, and they just made it hellaciously expensive, and then it wasn't as much fun because you were spending so much money, and it was so difficult and things like that there's like, well, I'll do something else.
And that's the lesson of this, is that you extract out to the point of past the point of reasonability, and then now all of a sudden you've created this void at the base that these corporate relationships are not because they're friends of yours. It's because there's a value proposition to them. And as soon as that value proposition is not there,
really?
They're not there.
Oh,
I know, right? But you think it's stating Mr. Obvious, but it's
friends.
like these guys are stretching all this stuff out. The hotels are built around it, and it's out in Concord. And it's like, if that racetrack isn't producing at the level that of the build around it, you're dealing with a lot of disparity in the market.
Well, and that's where you have to get creative with the track. So I've personally driven on Daytona now a couple dozen times because Daytona allows private groups to rent the track now on weekend.
And by the way,
fun.
And this brings in a good crowd. This is a crowd of people who are going to stay in the nicer hotels in the area, and they're going to eat the nice dinners and things like that. It's actually pretty smart that they do it. And it's actually, that's not the most expensive part of the thing. Like they've got 30, 40 drivers paying $200 each to rent the track for the weekend.
Sure. Sure.
Right. Well, and they do the supercar things and the drive the NASCAR and drive the, they don't do Formula One though. That would be a really good.
Well, here's some things that Charlotte's thinking about doing. Actually, they're in the process of planning it. They couldn't pull it off this year, but they're doing it next year. They're doing a road level race through Charlotte.
Like St. Pete does.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. But the thing I'll say about Charlotte that actually surprised me is how much it's developed.
Yeah.
So I went there over the summer with the family, and I was blown away by how much it had developed.
Yeah.
I stayed over in the Great Wolf over there.
Yeah.
By the way, if you have young kids, Great Wolf is literally a casino for children.
It is.
But if you look at the airport,
wait, who planned? Was that your wife or you who selected and picked Great Wolf?
It was me. So we did Asheville for 4 days and then Great Wolf for 4 days. So the first half of the trip was for the parents and the second half of the trip was for the kids.
And that's interesting. Great Wolf's marketing, they do not care about fathers at all. They only care about moms. They don't really care about kids that much. They only care about moms. And that's really, really, really smart.
Well, yeah. Well, here's the thing. Statistically, moms are the ones who book the travel. But we're an anomaly because I work in the hotel industry, and
you're the biggest kid in the family is what it is. You're the biggest
that too. I wanted a water park. But I'll be honest with you, actually, that whole trip was about escaping the heat of Orlando. And so Charlotte was not any cooler, but why Great Wolf was okay is because we had zero intention of leaving the hotel.
Right.
The entire time we were there.
And that's why Cancun and those areas pull so heavily from the Texas market. It's hellaciously hot in the summer, but it is in Texas too. And you've got this beautiful beach and these great hotels and these all-inclusive resorts, and you just you go and enjoy.
Charlotte's airport too is infrastructure-wise. There's a whole new third of the airport being built. It's massive, the construction.
I mean, I was blown away. Like, we did 1 day out of the hotel because we just needed to get out. And, we explored that whole area, and they've really got some nice stuff. Like, as a tourist destination, I think it's up there.
Hey, Ed, I was bragging about you to Jenny Hager from HSMAI. She's about ready to come down to Orlando for a 10-day vacation with the kids. And I said,
tell her to call me.
Yeah, because Ed's going to hook you up with what you need to do, when and where. So, I've been bragging about you. Also, speaking of strange people, I ran into a friend.
Really? Anyone who views this webcast, Ed
reach out to Ed, and he
can get you into the room in the castle comp. Ed can do that? I had no idea.
Also on our travels.
Want to stay?
Also,
we don't refer to my house as the castle anymore, Robert.
The Death Star. It's the Death
Star. Since David Siegel's so
well,
close.
That's we don't refer to you. You don't let people refer to you as Cinderella anymore either. So,
no, I know.
Things change. So.
On this trip, Ed, I met a friend of yours, or maybe an acquaintance, I should say, Rich with a VO.
Oh, yes. He's a great guy.
He's a great guy. And, of course, he was talking about him and Alex. Alex just reached out and wants to come back on the show because of things that have changed with Alice.
Yeah.
So I told him, please do, come on back.
Yeah, they got a bunch of money.
They got that expedia money. His background is going to be gold curtains, and he's going to have like a big gold necklace on, and
the license plate.
Time of day.
And then he'll have a posse around him. Who have no real reason for being there.
Right.
That's how I picture he's going to be.
Yeah, well, now that he's married and all, we were making jokes, Rich and I were about the fact that he can't be that suave, debonair, good-looking, dashing, accented man, because it's like, no, dude, you got the ring. Yeah, it all goes, nope, none of that no more.
He's going to develop an Alabama accent now.
Yes. Hey, Robert, since you were so nice to give us so many wonderful topics, and the Google one is one of my favorites out of it, but there's so many other ones out of it, please, grab one out of it. Because we only have...
I love the McKinsey one.
The McKinsey?
The one about advanced analytics.
Yeah. Well, why don't you do that? Actually, I'm posting something which is just a follow-up on the Great Wolf thing. So take off, and then I will follow.
The McKinsey one. Hold on.
The one that the McKinsey people wrote about the really advanced analytics capabilities.
Oh, the one that Stuart commented on, right?
Yeah. Well, because here's the thing.
I was going to say, can I tell you what Ed is going to say?
Go ahead, Ollie.
No, go ahead, Ed.
I'm completely aligned with Stuart on this, and it's because we've been spending a lot of time researching what hotels do with analytics.
Right.
We just wanted to know. And so we went to our most advanced hotels that have really, have a lot of their business practices really well hammered down. And we knew we're using more advanced analytics packages and had went through the pain to do it. And I'll tell you what, even them, the answer, and I'll tell you, so I said, listen, I know you have really good analytics. What do you do with it? And the answer consistently was, we talk about it a lot in meetings.
Right. Yep.
And that's it, because no one knows what to even do with it.
Right.
Because the thing is access to data is not necessarily a good thing. So I'll give you an example. The analytics Flip2 actually has on behavior and things like that is substantially bigger than what we expose to customers. One of the reasons for that is we only expose analytics to customers that they can action.
Right.
That it's clear what you should do here. What's the opportunity? What does this mean? And if it can't be presented in a way that any customer would know what to do with it, we don't expose it until we can figure out how to expose it in a meaningful way. Because, listen, even advanced people in Google Analytics will tell you it takes years of experience and experimentation to even understand what any of these key metrics that people speak off and quote all the time mean.
Right.
What it actually means.
Yeah. The best quote I had was Expedia's CIO, who I interviewed for a Focusrite paper that I wrote on AI and big data a while ago, a couple of years ago. He said, and they had been really at it, spending millions on this, hiring great data scientists. He said, anybody who tells you that they're getting the answers, he goes, no, they're lying to you. He goes, we are only learning what questions to ask right now with all that information. Because you can jump to these conclusions, but it's like, hey, they could be completely wrong.
Well, and here's the other
problem. When you're looking at all
problem.
these signals, what's the interrelationship of all these complex signals, especially with travel and hotel? It's not a point A to point B. Oh, cause, effect, simple.
No.
Nothing like it.
Two things. One is for those who are watching, Melissa, thank you. She commented, Ed, on your statement. Bravo. Please don't give clients more data than they handle. The amount of data is very, very small. The other is I'm going to be stepping away in just probably about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but we actually can handle 6 views. So if anybody would like to join the conversation, it is always an open invitation for people if they would like. Just indicate that you raise your hand on the side, say that you'd like to join, and we'll click you through and it'll automatically send the ability for you to join us. Mm-hmm. So if you feel like speaking about it and have a camera, come on, join the party.
No, well, and so to make a point that Stuart was talking about in an email that I think is important to talk about is, most hotels don't even have their handoff to their booking engine set up correctly in their analytics. Some of that's because the booking engines make it nearly impossible. Some of it's just because they just don't have anyone advanced enough on their team to do it. So I can tell you this, if any function of your site is showing up as source, you have your analytics set up wrong. If your own domain is a top referrer, you have your analytics set up wrong.
Self-referral. If your IP address is not cleared at your location when people log into your Wi-Fi, so you have an inordinate amount of people in your market visiting your website, you're set up wrong.
The landing page for everyone who logs into Wi-Fi.
Yes, but these are things that it's just a quick telling sign that this company that you're talking to, if any of these things are existent in their analytics reports, that means they're not actually looking at their analytics. They're not doing anything with their analytics. And I got to be honest with you, Google Analytics is probably one of the worst things to happen to hotels because it's easy to set up and it gives you tons of data. And unless you are really in it and have taken the education on it and understand human behavior, it tells you absolutely nothing. There's not a lot of value you can drive out of it. But there are people who have, without knowing really how you should take this data, what do the trends mean? It's not doing you any favors. Now, I don't mean give up. What I'm actually saying is educate yourself.
But the tag management of event tracking, things like that, a lot of they just set up they put the tag in and that's it. And they're done. And then they just start pouring through
Yep.
God knows what. Even for day of week analysis, though. It's they.
Oh,
I
I
just
just a word in.
Holly
It's all
won't.
right.
Holly won't interrupt.
Holly won't.
I'll just
I'm
say
just
one.
not rude.
I'll just
Robert,
I
I'm going to hit mute on you. No, I'm just kidding.
No, it's fine. No,
one
my only
thing. Oh, go ahead.
No, my only point was that's exactly the hotel itself doesn't attract a whole lot of data scientists. And so the data that they're getting, they're not going to act on it because they're not confident that it's accurate. I think if they had a confidence level in the data that it was accurate, then you're going to see people taking a lot more actions. I think as a business, if any of us could figure out how to get clear, accurate data that decision makers are comfortable with, then we would be light years ahead.
I'll say yes to that, but I'll also disagree with part of that. I've witnessed, unfortunately, in presentations and in meeting rooms, even when it's a clear question of, is it sunshine today or is it raining today, you get a paralysis of opinion. Even as simple of a question, even with the data being clearly defined as good versus bad, this is marked red, bad, arrow down. This is marked good, green, arrow up. You get people that are not willing to say, this is what I think this is. And so what really is challenging, and to Ed's point, is when you start setting up the analytics to start answering more complex questions, or really to Robert's point, we're just getting to the point of knowing what questions to ask. Now you're getting into a whole nother level of lack of interpretation and understanding, because nobody, other than the fearless, are going to go raise their hand and say, I think this is what this means, and be willing to take a position on interpreting the data that's being put in front. And so, yes, to Ed's point, Google Analytics is a bane for those because they think they're being given simplistic answers. But to your point, Holly, I think it's a matter of having the cojones step up and say, this is what I think this means, and this is why I think it, and have the validation to back it up.
Right, but with that, this also leads to something else you've heard me say many a times. You also need to accept that you're never done. Like first of all, I hate opinions. I really do. And
but you have so many.
When it comes to me, it's not an opinion.
Oh, wait, it's backwards.
I may not always be right, but I'm never wrong.
But I'm never wrong.
No, I mean, listen, I love data. I prefer data over opinions any day. And if you can't look at data and come up with an answer, that means you need to come up with a test. And then you run your test, and your test may give you more questions to ask, but then you do more testing. And eventually at the end, you get some form of answer. It may not be detailed. It may not be exactly what you needed, but you'll at least have an answer that's driven from data and testing.
Well, and that's partially true. I shouldn't say it's partially true. That's 100% true. However, two really, really important factors. One is you need good data to start off with. Just the raw data has to be collected. And the number of groups I've seen where just the data is crap, it destroys. They can have a process like that, but they're coming up with the wrong answers because it's the garbage in, garbage out. The other thing is that they really need to understand their business, because you can let's look at this month versus last month or something, last 30 days. Well, the days of the week change, and that's really important for hotels is when they look over a year.
I mean, that's something they have to understand too. Every day is different.
Right.
And so you can't compare January 5th of last year to October 10th of this year.
So
but even when you're looking over last year, when you're looking year over year, you've got to adjust for the days of the week, and nobody does.
Okay, but I'm going to interpret what Ed said early on. You may have an opinion, and you may have it substantiated by fact, and when you finally put real data with their opinion, you'll eventually end up where Ed was already at.
Well said.
That's right.
Oh, my God. Anyway.
This is why no one ever thought I'd get married.
Oh, goodness.
No,
I actually witnessed Ed saying he doesn't like opinions. I actually saw the kettle call.
But your wife is on the
opinions any day.
But your wife is on the fast track to sainthood, so that's
yes,
really,
she is.
Yes, she is. Oh no, see, she figured it out. Treat everything I say as if I'm completely wrong, and it completely destroys my ability to argue anything.
Okay.
That's right.
So to keep Stuart in the conversation, I'm just going to read what he sent over in comparison to what we've been talking about for this article. He says, while AI is certainly an amazing opportunity for the hospitality industry to leverage more complex data for efficiency and personalization, the industry is still not using the simplest forms of data that are currently available to them. 80% plus of independent hotels who come to us aren't even tracking the conversion events of their online booking engine because of it being too difficult to get cross-domain tracking to work, or because their booking engine vendor doesn't integrate with Google Analytics. Of the folks that do have the data available to them, a lot don't analyze it to gain insights or make decisions. So in spirit of Stuart, I thought I'd read that out too. So yeah.
Well, and that's an important thing too. Like, so, we've been venturing further and further to, can we help solve this issue for our clients and give them some clarity in their day? And so, we're integrated to most of the major booking platforms already, in a way that gives us access to analytics. So we started paying attention to that part of the data stream. And what we found was really interesting. So there were a couple that you could tell they didn't want to be a contributor to the problem, and they have their engine set up to work beautifully with analytics packages. And then some of the ones that probably wouldn't surprise you, check the box that you can connect an analytics engine up to us, but then they proceed to break every rule in how you should speak to an analytics engine by puking all over it with an overkill of data that you cannot sift through without like an advanced engineer building solutions to sort through it. And what's funny is I went back to some of my close customers who I know like look at analytics that have that booking engine. And I said, so how do you get your data for that booking engine? Because I know you're not getting it through your Google Analytics. And they're like, oh, no, you're right. They feed us a report. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
I gotta say something, and this is something I've learned. And this is what was hard for me, is that I used to go over and try to be as truthful about the data as possible. Here's what it says. And then I would go into the now learned lesson of variations or exceptions. Like, well, this is what it says, but there are some things that don't hold to this, or there are some and of course, that's the rabbit hole everybody chases. It's like they stop looking at the real overall view and start chasing down, what do you mean by exceptions? What are the variables? And so even when I tried to disclaimer it at the front, like from an economics class, hey, if all things were consistent, this is the one thing we're looking at. I've stopped even referring to the exceptions. If somebody's smart enough in the conversation to say, wait a minute, that doesn't fit for all things, I'm like, you're right. But those things aren't important enough to talk about right now. This is the progressive data. This is the generalized data that you need to be looking at.
Trends are all you should be trying to figure out inside your analytics, unless you're a data scientist. Like,
I totally agree.
Your data reports, you're looking for trends and movement inside those trends that are meaningful. And the definition of meaningful is a 5% change in either direction is something that you call attention to in a trend. Because here's the other thing. If you're an independent hotel or even a single hotel, like you're just a single hotel of data access, the sample's too small.
Right.
The sample's too small. And so, by the way, this McKinsey article, right? It was McKinsey who wrote it, right? Yeah. This was a love letter to the brands, hoping that the brands would bite on it, because the brands are the only entities inside of travel that have big enough sampling size to be able to use AI the way they're talking about using AI.
Most of them
AI requires a lot of data to be valid. And a single hotel group, a collection of 7 hotels, like it's just not a big enough sampling to work. So this was a love letter to Hilton or Marriott or IHG or Wyndham or any of these players that have enough scale in consumer impact to actually be able to deploy AI in a way that it would actually be adding value.
And afford to pay McKinsey.
Well, because these are their customers in travel.
Right. Yeah. No. And with the dispersion of the hotels, it really winds up being a problem of, yes, you may be able to see something macro for the website of how things are behaving, but what's going on in Seattle versus Portland versus LA or Atlanta? Yeah, those just don't transfer. Here we go.
A couple $100 million to figure that out for them.
Sure. I'd be very happy. No problem.
No, I mean, listen, it really reads like a love letter to the brands. And that's what it is. Like, here's the thing. Like, I'm going to tell hotels, unless you're willing to become part of like a data cooperative with hundreds or thousands of other hotels around you, AI is not in your near future for any of your analytics or decision making or anything like that, because your data set is too small.
I'll give a perfect example of it. When I was messing with Watson initially, we were shoving a lot of raw hotel data in, structured, and mostly structured, almost all of it was structured. And the young kid that was doing it for me, who was a theoretical mathematician, he was a brilliant kid. And we're shoving it through, and he says, I got my first high confidence correlation. And I know you told you guys this, but I'm telling in the show. And it's like, well, what is it? It's like, the length of stay increases the revenue. And we're like, yeah, that's kind of got that one. Look for something maybe that's a little bit more helpful, because to them,
higher quality reviews, you get a higher daily rate, which was this big revelation. It's like, luxury hotel, things like that.
It wasn't a big revelation. It was proof. That's all.
Oh.
Yes, but in my example, it's like if somebody stays longer, they
there's
spend
an
more.
entire type of hotelier that I knew back then that was a big revelation for them, because they were the naysayers. They were the ones that were calling for proof of this, because they truly did not believe that service score tied to rate.
Well, because if you don't have proof of it, then you've got to invest more money in having a higher quality, and you're not sure that's where you should be putting your money. I totally get it.
Hospitality.
No, I do, but there is a certain degree of cynicism involved in that approach. It's the same thing as the guys who don't, at the large, destination resort, don't invest in Wi-Fi because they're saying, well, what's the payback? How many more bookings will we get because they'll refer to it? It's like, you've got shitty Wi-Fi.
Actually, I'll tell you what it means, because I can't remember who did it, but I do remember that last night someone was traveling and posted a speed test from hotel Wi-Fi, and it was like 236 up and down meg.
Wow.
Yeah, like in hotel. I was like, holy smokes.
That's
crazy.
Everybody's gonna say hi to Jenny. She can't hear you.
Jenny.
Hi, Jenny.
Oh, hi, Holly.
Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jenny.
Hello from Atlanta.
Yeah, hello from Atlanta, in case you didn't hear.
What hotel are you in Atlanta?
We're at the Hyatt Regency downtown.
Which
explains
an
old John
behind him.
A John Portman designed property.
Actually, it's
the
beautiful.
birth of the Atrium Hotel.
Atrium Hotel, yes, and to say what they've done to this place is, it's an understatement. I mean, it really feels like a brand new hotel. I mean, for being
the ceiling work isn't that great. It's still not.
Well, this is down the bottom ground level.
By the angle of the angle of the camera.
But I do have to go and give tribute to Stuart. Holly has her Stormtrooper mug, and then I have what would be a good assimilation of a Star Trek warp core. So,
It's true.
I think we kind of got the tech covered for today's sake. I apologize as much as I want. Yeah, I want to.
Oh, sorry, Loren. Go ahead.
No. I just want to. I have to step away because I got to join back into the group. I'm missing the Google Translation earbud conversation, which I think is
what I was about to bring up. Go
ahead. I'm gonna a couple of minutes and go ahead. You do it, Mr. Ed. Talk about it.
So here's what's great. So first of all, have any of you used World Lens, which is the company that Google bought to start down this technology? So I traveled with World Lens all the time. It was my favorite version of what augmented reality could be. And it was really like a true utility that actually just had immense value. So what World Lens is it used your camera and you could hold it up to text, and in real time it would translate that text to whatever language you had set to. And it was quick, like real time. So traffic signs, menus, it was my favorite app. And when Google bought it, I was instantly excited about it because I knew what they were looking to do. And so this next step, well, it's still clunky in its delivery. The only reason it's clunky in its delivery is because they have not been able to predict what you're going to say next fast enough. So they're working on it. That's actually what they're working on, is understanding like at the time you start pronouncing a word to be able to know what word it is. Because once they do that, you'll actually be able to hand an earbud to the other person, and the two of you will be able to real-time conversate with each other with no in-between clunkiness. Like, you won't have to wait for it because it will be predicting what you're going to say next, and translating before you even complete the word.
Right. And Google's using Yeah, and they're using all of the things that they're learning from Android of people typing, and all the grammar and natural language search and all of that ties in and helps. Even though people, may type and speak, slightly differently, they're building all that in.
Yeah, but they solve for that.
Where
I
AI,
mean,
yeah.
this is where I said Google has the biggest head start in anything AI. It's because they have the largest user base, and they have been doing things to train AI for years at a massive scale. When you answer a CAPTCHA, like pick the parts of the image that have a street sign in it, like that's training AI.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all of that, like translate this word or
yeah.
say what this word is, and it's a word inside of an image. That's training AI. For years, they've been doing that. And so, like they have the largest user base of humans training AI
continually
of
helping them. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
because they were smart. They knew this was going to be the problem. They knew that you needed just a massive manual effort to train AI. So that's where all these little widgets that Google had designed to just like improve the world. But really what you were doing, like, and why you were probably wondering why it was a free service, it's because you were training their AI.
Right.
Well, and that's why Google, when was it, 2009, they declared that they were a mobile first company, right?
Yeah.
But 18 months ago, they declared they're an AI first company. And that it is. And it's just not because it's a nice buzzword. Yeah.
Like they're way ahead of IBM. They're way ahead of Microsoft. They're way ahead of everyone. Not because they have better engineers, designing better things. It's because they just have the largest amount of the population actually training their AI.
Well, and they're exchanging data with Microsoft and IBM and all these groups, these open AI projects. They've all figured out, hey, partitioning this off and trying to make it proprietary, you get worse results. So share it and then just
build on it.
Compete, and just go and improve it. And
So where this comes into is WorldLens is actually the very first version of what now is this earbud technology. And really, it's not real-time translation. It's near real-time translation. What they're actually trying to get to is what I talked about, which is as you're completing a word, that word is being completed in its translated form in the other person's earbud. And we're not far away from it. We're measurable in single-digit years away from having the true, like Babelfish type
universal translator. Hey, I'm going to have to duck. I'm pressing it. So y'all just don't hit the stop presentation button because that'll kill it. Because I made you all admins of it. Yeah, you're all admins. So just don't hit the stop presentation.
That means you, Ed.
Don't hit the big red button. Thank you all for carrying on with the show. Thank you, everybody that's been participating. It gives more space for anybody else anyway, but we'll catch you all next week, and thank you all very much. I'll catch up with you guys. All right?
Travel safe.
Very good.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Loren.
Bye. Oh, we should have asked him where you could find him.
On the show.
Loren, great.
Does he do anything else?
Hospitality digital marketing.com.
So did you see, though, in that other article about the Marriott TED bed, that there was another company
that's working on it. Like there's a lot of companies trying to solve because it's been a long time belief that one of the breakdowns in one of the basic breakdowns that causes war is just the inability to communicate.
Right.
And like that's been believed for a long time before technology was even close to being able to address it. So like you're talking about solving for one of the core challenges in the human, history. Like you fix this, you change the world forever.
Right. It combats tribalism, basically. Right. Where you break this down. We don't know what they're saying, but it's pretty scary and it's got to be bad and all that stuff. And all of a sudden you go, no. They're saying they really like us. We want to do something. That's not that wave like that isn't threatening. That's
Yeah, because I mean, listen, I mean, how many wars do you think almost started because even the translator wasn't doing a good job translating to the dignitary what was actually happening, and how much room for espionage there has been in this whole breakdown in communication. So there have been companies, and I follow it very closely because I actually think like when you talk about things that impact humanity, this is one of those pieces of technology that will get a flash of like people recognizing that, oh, this is a big deal, and then it'll quickly quiet down and just become part of the fabric
Normal.
of our everyday. And
Yeah.
and we'll talk about how crazy it was when people couldn't speak to each other, like how cavemanish were we, like and so that's truly what's amazing about AI. It's like I think it's the pinnacle of what AI can do for us, is get us to all be able to speak to each other and understand.
Certainly it's a part of it, but look, within our own country, we do speak the same language and still lack of understanding reigns supreme.
Right. Well, no, and that's
Yes, but in our own
a
country,
very
we
interesting.
also
But
don't
that's
speak the same language. Even
yeah.
if it is a
But
form of English, it's very different.
yeah. But what's happened
But we,
is,
we do
I mean, it's
understand the word.
weaponizing. But the technology in many cases has been weaponized, right,
Right.
against the democracy. I mean, that's the thing. That's the whole thing with technology. It moves it forward. Well, yes. What if somebody hacks the AI and all of a sudden you say, "Yes, we love you." It means I want to kill you. That's not
Right.
good,
Right.
sort of thing. So
I
if
know,
you can
because I'm
weaponize,
sure it would do the opposite, which means half the people I talk to in the day will think I love them.
exactly. Your
Um,
relationship will change amongst your family members. Yeah, it's amazing. So,
They'll be
what,
like, "Wow,
Holly? Are you okay?
Dad's saying he loves me so much
mm,
now."
I have a visitor dog at my house, and I'm watching out of the corner of my eye, and there looked like there's a little battle going on. Um,
Oh,
can we talk about the Marriott Ted bed, though?
Yeah.
yeah. I
Is
just posted the link.
I
Yep.
think that's the coolest thing. You guys, obviously, I'm behind the times. We're aware that this happened last year.
Yep. We've spoken about it actually.
Yeah.
They're doing these types of incubator
Yeah.
startup competitions like all over the place. They do a lot of them.
Right. Yeah, there was just one. I think it was last week that Focusrite sponsored in San Francisco.
Yep.
I think it's the coolest thing ever.
I think it is
Yeah.
cool. I
Oh no,
think they're
and they
probably one of the only companies of their size in this industry too that can actually do it.
Yeah.
But I'm still going to say, like, it's great PR. It's great to have a measurement of understanding. I think it's horrible for the startups.
It is. It's the worst.
Landing
Why?
landing
Why?
Marriott as a startup is the worst thing that could happen to you because you are basically beholden to Marriott's ideas and Marriott's demands because you are funded by Marriott.
And
It's
Marriott's
one of the
use
biggest
cases.
mistakes
Yeah.
startups make is they chase after the big customer that will fund what they want to do, and then they get just completely stifled by that. Basically, that customer becomes the defining customer
No.
of how you build your technology.
I'll give you an example. The guys who developed Siri, right, sold to Apple for a lot of money, right? I mean, that was not organically developed within Apple. That was an acquisition.
Yeah.
And they did amazing work. But that platform wasn't designed to be almost we were talking about the AI being shared. That
Right.
was designed to be kind of cross-platform and hey, everybody will be able to do this. Apple wanted to make it proprietary so they could
Yep.
leverage their margins, which in fairness to Apple, hey, with their market cap, that has worked pretty well for them. So that's fine. But those guys then went and spun out, did another company, I can't remember what it was called, a new AI bot, which was amazing. It wrote its own code. It was freaking, they sold to Samsung. They did it again. These guys doing really innovative stuff, but it's just like, wow, they're offering us checks of hundreds of millions of dollars. Do we want to keep struggling along doing this, or do we
Right, and the answer is
then
always
maybe
no. But it is
Right.
it's at the expense of the vision
Right.
and the impact it can have. So if any
This
of
is-
these companies sign Marriott, like you'll never hear of them. Like you'll never see them get to a travel click type scale. You'll never see any of that because what Marriott wants and what Marriott needs will be their primary things. And here's
Right.
the problem. I got to be honest with you. We develop, and I've done this now with two companies. we develop a large amount of our strategy outside of the wants and needs that we're told by our customers, because you have to understand why they are saying they want it and why they are saying they need it. And then you need to be able to separate, is just because of that, does it mean it should be done? And I can't tell you how many times I avoided pitfalls that competitors of mine didn't, because yes, every customer saying they want this, but they're wrong.
Right.
What they actually want is this, but they're thinking they want this because they don't understand why they're saying they want this. And so when you end up with a customer who's so powerful that they literally can veto your desire to do that, which again, if you're a small startup and Marriott's your customer, like that's more, they have more power in that company than any other person in that company. And the problem with that is when you start getting into middle management, having access to that vendor relationship, lower management, the breakdown, the amount of people giving input without, really understanding the impact of the input they're given to these vendors, they will completely strangle these vendors.
Yeah. Well, what if
Not
Marriott would have? Not intentionally. What if Marriott would have acquired Easy Yield, right?
It would have been destroyed.
Right. They would have said, oh, well, let's focus on such and such connection. Or, you know what, we want to do this to compete against Pegasus, or do this with the GDSs or something, because that's where these huge volumes of traffic and costs were associated. They go, we can use this tool, which can be used for a lot of stuff. And we see the vision. We like it. Good technologists, that we love all that. Right. So, it's a talent hire. But then they go, yeah, but here's how we're getting this stuff approved budgetarily. Here's our pain points. Number 2 on it is this. You guys are just, it doesn't have to be full time. You can still do your stuff, but just work on this one. And then all of a sudden,
and then there's lists miles long of those type of things. So that and it's
the one-to-end list. Yeah.
Yep.
Look at your Google example earlier with the mass training your AI, the masses of people training your AI. Isn't that a little bit similar to what Marriott's doing? I mean, these startups are going in and they have this huge test place in Marriott. And yeah, Marriott's going to make some demands on you, but you don't only have to focus on that. You're getting a whole bunch of cash. You're getting a whole bunch of customers. You get a whole bunch of testing. And as long as you use that
we might not be getting a whole bunch of cash.
Yeah, you're not getting a whole bunch of cash. Like
these aren't exits. These aren't acquisitions. This is just an incubator. So you get a lot of, you get access to stuff. You get in there, you get some.
To get into it.
Yeah, they do a pilot. It goes well.
But here's the thing, Marriott, and again, none of this do I believe is intentional, but this is the difference that people have to understand that happens in true startups. So when I'm talking about true startups, I'm talking about companies that bring something that didn't exist before into the industry. Okay, I've done it twice. And there's a big difference between these types of companies. And if you look who Marriott's picking, they are picking those types of companies, the companies that are bringing things that aren't the hot topic. They're the absolute most susceptible to being destroyed by having too big of an early customer. Because the best thing, and the thing you look for when you start a company that's bringing something completely new to an industry, you need quiet failure. Because because it's never existed before, the majority of what you're operating on are just really educated guesses. And then what happens is in your early customers, you test those educated guesses and you adjust and you learn about new opportunities. So you do little pivots and you do this and you do that. If you do that with a big customer, the stakes, it's like literally going and saying, Holly, I want you to cash out anything you have as value, go to Vegas and bet it all on either black or red.
Yeah.
Because that is the risk that these companies take. But the big difference is they're doing it over and over and over and over and over again when they have a customer like Marriott. I didn't get my first large brand customer for Easy Yield until 5 years in. And we were ready for it because I had lots of customers that had similar scenarios and scale. So I didn't have someone the same scale as the brand I had started working with, but I had worked with a lot of the medium scale, companies that were kind of similar and in similar situations. So by the time I got that large brand customer, man, I was so ready for them that we were the best thing that could have happened to them with a lot of the situations they were in. And they were the best thing that could have happened to us because we were completely ready for the opportunity. That was 5 years in. There are modern examples of like really interesting startups that the worst thing that happened to them were the big customers they landed early on. Let's look
too much investment. They get a round.
Well, it's the same thing. It's the same problem.
Yeah, insane.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
so let's look at group
yeah.
buys. Look at group buys. Yeah. So any of you, they're great. They're amazing. They do great stuff. The worst thing that happened to them was their very early wins were giants. And it completely stretched them way too thin. They weren't ready for it. They took it anyways because hello, you need the money to do the things you need to do. And it honestly, I think had they not done that, had they not gone that route, the original version of group buys and what group buys solved for would actually be widely adopted across all the brands today. But it was actually the fact that they got a brand so early in their life cycle that I'm talking from the outside, so they're welcome to come and tell me I'm wrong. But I truly believe that why they're not in some super advanced form of what their original product did is because of who their early customers were. They had no chance to incubate the idea, to quietly fail, to do any of those things that you do when you bring a completely new idea to a market. So listen, if you're building a really good central res system and you land an early deal with Marriott, that's probably the best thing that could ever happen to you. Because guess what? You're coming from an area where there are already defined things that because there's been a gazillion central reservation systems during the history that you can just go and pick through the ashes of or look at the successes of and build your guide. But when you're in a completely new area where you're pushing people into ways of thinking that they've never thought of before, the worst thing that can happen to you is landing a massive customer.
Yeah. Or getting too much investment or getting investment from the wrong partner. All those things can kill you because they go, oh, these sites sound great. And then all of a sudden they go, whatever, with their investment round, they need certain returns. You can't get a minimum viable product is the big thing, right? So all of a sudden you're releasing something which may be, not where it should be, but it's good enough. In an environment like Marriott, they can't roll that out to 6,000 hotels and 30 brands, right? It's got to be ready for prime time to an extent that no startup would make. That's
the process that they're going through. They're testing it. They're piloting it. I mean, they're taking what would maybe take 2 or 3 years and condensing it into.
But here's what you're not thinking about is what happens next. So let's say Marriott really wants it. So they're going to say to them, listen, in order for this to work for us, you need to be able to do this laundry list of things that are specific to only us. Right. And that's it. And guess what? We're going to pay you our normal, what our normal agreement with you would have been. We're not going to pay for the custom work.
You've got to integrate with Marcia.
Right. Which is going to be a substantial amount of work that will only pay off with keeping Marriott for a long time. And again, I'm saying this Marriott isn't intentionally doing any of this, and we're only picking on saying Marriott because they're the ones who are out working with startups, which I think it's great that they work with startups. My big warning is to all of those startups is don't try and even think of your 5-year plan having all of Marriott, because if that's the thought in your head, you are either going to become a full-time employee of Marriott, which is not why you set out to do what you're doing, or you're going to end up failing. because
Yes.
you're going to end up thinking reality is Marriott's reality, when in reality, there's different reality everywhere. Marriott is different than Hilton. Hilton is different than Wyndham, and they're all different from all the independent hotels, and they're all different from the soft brands. And so what happens when you don't have the big fish paying, you actually get the chance to kind of survey the field and say, what are the common realities? How do I make it work in most instances and build the architecture right to be able to survive these types of demands? And when you don't have the chance to build your core infrastructure the right way, because you're not being paid to build it the right way, in the case of winning a deal that's large, you're being paid to make it work their way. You end up with code base that's unusable for future growth, and then you end up addicted to the customer. And that's why when you look at private equity groups that look to buy middle market companies, one of the things they're hugely concerned about is concentration of revenue. And it's not just because of the fear of losing it, it's because of the things you'll have to do to keep it, and you'll be able to justify doing those things to keep that revenue because there's so much concentration of revenue in that account.
So you are saying if a startup gets a deal with Marriott, because Marriott has said, of all the companies we've interviewed, you have the right stuff, you don't think private equity investors somewhere are going to think, I'm going to invest in this company. They're not going to be able to raise money to put
private
the right
equity
infrastructure.
doesn't invest in startups. That's venture capital that invests in startups.
venture-
But I'll tell you what, if venture capital invests in it, they're going to say, we don't want a penny of our money going to developing Marriott unless it's a guaranteed sale at the end of the development, and you have done the modeling that you're going to get what you need to out of it, and then the rest of the money we're giving you is to get the rest of the market.
Right.
Right.
But I mean,
then here's the
that's a
problem.
good thing.
No, it's not, Holly.
No.
Because now
This is a case of you presenting me with data that I don't like, and so me not wanting to believe it.
Right,
That's,
but I've
therein lies the problem.
This is
entire
how the
adult
investment
life.
and startup community works, though.
Right.
I mean, that's really the key. That's the bottom line. Let's say one of these little companies. Well, two things. One is all of these companies that they're incubating. Marriott is not expecting all of them to be successful. They don't want. They're going to pick one or two. You know, you got 100 of them, 1,000 of them. It doesn't matter, and that's how VCs work too.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. But even those.
But even out of the
three,
three,
they might pick. Nah, they might.
They pick 1 in 7.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So they don't necessarily care. They just want whatever kind of fights its way to the top, and they'll go with that. If they come up with a revolutionary technology that reads your mind and knows exactly the perfect fit for the hotel room that you should have, should they sell that to Hilton? Should they sell that to IHG or Wyndham or Accor? No, Marriott does not want that to happen, and that puts a clamp right on your upside. Now,
Listen,
I'm not saying these guys are idiots to work with Marriott. That's a good thing, but not everybody wants to go public or do this or be successful. Some of these guys may just go, we've got a little business, and all we're looking for is an acquisition that's pretty good, and working for Marriott would be great, and that's fine. Yeah,
yeah,
and
but
good.
let's talk about the other pitfalls of this. One, Marriott has now put on notice what they care about right now. So there are big companies now looking at this going, how long could it take us to get to a viable option for Hilton? Because we're big enough, we can turn it around in weeks, because now we know what matters. So, like one of the best things that happened to me at Easy Yield is I had 2 years where no one knew this was something the industry wanted. So I had 2 years without a competitor. And then when I did get a competitor, it was a huge company who made a lot of mistakes. And every time they made a mistake, I acquired every customer that they spent to get. And I acquired it at a higher rate than them. And then I kept them. Yeah. So, sometimes it's good for the world to not completely understand what you're solving. Yeah. Because that means you get to quietly build and get ahead. Because here's the thing, I had 2 years of a head start. At the point I sold the company, Easy Yield was still ahead of the 100 and something competitors they had. And a lot of that was the head start we got in the first 2 years.
Right. First mover advantage is huge. And now it's somewhat a commodity, right?
Right.
I mean, yeah. I mean, people can go out and they've just, bolted on kind of, oh, this is how a channel manager works. We did this. And yeah, Ed's the pioneer. He had to keep pulling, the arrows out of his back and going,
Every step of the way.
there's no way out of this canyon.
Yeah.
I got to back up type thing.
Let's figure out how to flood this canyon so we can swim over it, because that's our only option.
Exactly.
No,
yeah, but
so
it's a peril. It's a peril. Startup, being a startup is a perilous thing, to do.
It is.
Yep. So listen, I'd get more excited if companies like Qmni would do this, because Qmni is a good scale-proof type customer that won't end up owning the company that they're incubating.
Right.
I wish they would all do it.
Fairmount, Fairmount Raffles Swiss Hotel, another one. Before they got bought by a core,
Yeah.
but they were a really good test case for startups, because you could solve for a lot of the industry, because they're group houses, they're luxury. There was a lot about them that made them really high quality customers for, really developing out solutions that had wide appeal.
Well, Accor does have that media lab.
Yeah.
I mean,
Accor's doing a lot of stuff. They're acquiring a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
They're doing.
They're doing testing. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Right. But the same thing I'll say is the worst thing that could happen to Flip2 is, Expedia wanting to use the product.
So
now, you would probably go, well, wait, why? Why would that be horrible? They'd probably give you more money and you'd probably get all this. It would completely destroy so many aspects of the product that it wouldn't be commercially viable for the majority of the industry.
But Ed, Benchmark wants to give you $100 million, not the hotel company.
I wish Benchmark, because they give us all their hotels. I wish they would also give us $100 million.
No, not them. The other one, or Technology Crossover Ventures. Eric Blatchford, whatever. $100 million. Ed might take it.
Nope. Unless they want to buy it.
Well,
if they want to buy it,
that's true.
It's $300 million. So anyone who wants to give me $300 million, Flip2 yours.
That is the price. Huh?
Yeah, there's a price for everything.
Do you enjoy telling children there is no Santa?
My children, no.
No,
Other people's children.
Wait, what, Holly?
I was so excited about this Marriott Ted bed that I'd never heard of.
Awesome. And it's good for them. And actually, here's the funny thing.
Oh no, it's good. It's great for Marriott.
For Marriott is they're now they're going through their own testing to understand what really matters to them, and they're now telling the industry, here are the things we really think are really cool. And now the companies who have the wherewithal to develop the product are going to start developing that product to sell to companies like Marriott. So for Marriott, no matter what happens, it's a win, right? It's a PR win, because look, they're not old and stodgy like their technology. They're really advanced and, forward thinking and, really good. And for their employees, oh my gosh, to be the employees who get to be part of this, how hugely motivating all of that is. And then even if these startups don't end up being the ones to do this thing, there will be other companies who this is now a focus.
There's also another cautionary tale. Sabre had Sabre Labs, and Terry Jones is handled founder of Travelocity within Sabre, right? Developed that. They were developing prototype. They were not building things to scale, because when you build things to scale at Sabre, it's a whole different. 120,000 transactions a second, is kind of demanding. So they would build these and we were doing amazing. And I had very, very limited development budget running the hotel program. So I used Sabre Labs for tons of development and research work. It was fantastic. And they were doing drive pathing. We were showing the CEO of MapQuest stuff that he was like, how do you do that? And it's like, well, we've got some really good technologists who've been working on just this little travel related problem, right? MapQuest working on all sorts of things. We're just trying to figure out how do you do this pathing. So doing amazing stuff. The problem is the rest of Sabre and Sabre Decision Technologies, which used to be part of Sabre, got spun off to EDS, is now part of HP sort of thing. They wanted to kill it. Everything these guys came up with, they were getting patents, and they're going, that's a piece of crap, because A, they didn't build it with their guys. It wasn't production ready. It didn't do that. And you're like, it is a proof of concept. It is really good stuff. Now you guys should take it and really, that part of the company did not work out well at all, right? And Saber Labs still exists, but nothing that was like it. Yeah, and it crushed the soul of those guys.
Very
And
few things can handle unlimited scale.
Yeah,
scale kills most things if it comes too fast.
Right.
Bottom line, I don't care how advanced you were in developing it. To develop the end product as the first product is not commercially viable.
Right.
Like, it's just not. You can't,
unless
here's
you
the
had
thing.
a big exit, unless you had this huge exit, you had a ton of money, you don't care, and you're just passionate about, which is kind of the Tesla SpaceX type thing, right? Elon Musk could.
He's just a moonshot guy. He's a moonshot guy, and he can spend more than what's justifiable to fix things that people aren't even sure has value in the future, right?
Sure.
And he can be wrong because he's playing with other people's money, he's playing with other people's futures, and he isn't hugely concerned with that. So
no, and watch Shark Tank. I mean, you watch Shark Tank, the number of people who will give away ridiculous terms just to work with Mark Cuban or whatever, and you go, oh, that's not good for you, maybe.
Nope, it's horrible.
And every once in a while they'll say, you should not take our money, you should go do your own thing. And then no, they want to do it. Or people who are just there for the PR, right? They just want to go, get the exposure and then not take their money.
But the most interesting companies are companies that are built not with making money as the first thing they care about. They're passionate about solving a problem. They're passionate about moving something forward. They're passionate about something. And as that company grows, that passion becomes a pillar of how the company operates. And eventually the reality is you have to make money because that feeds the ability to execute the passion. But you end up making decisions very differently than a customer would or than a investor would. Okay, so this is where you have to understand that it's not always good for certain things to end up in the hands of success too early, because it is the pain, it is the education, it is the failure that shapes the product and the people that then drive it to success. The best successes, the best overnight successes have been at it for 15 years before the overnight success happened.
Yep. No, absolutely. Yeah, and you have unanticipated things that go wrong, right? You have, some sort of large, event, 9/11 or something like that hits that killed a lot of, or just the tech bubble burst. Didn't have anything to do with this one great company.
Economic crisis killed a lot of companies, but was the beginning of the rocket of Airbnb and Priceline.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, that's when those companies, who probably wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for financial crisis existing.
9/11 saved Priceline.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
No, but and with that, I have to go.
Okay.
So I'm going to leave you with the soul-crushing reality that the one thing you think every entrepreneur wants is the worst thing for them, which is the big early customer.
Yep.
And there is no Santa. Goodbye.
Goodbye. You can find me at flip.to and on social at Edward St.Onge and on Holly's blog, ihateed.com.
Wow.
Bye, guys.
Bye. And Robert, you're going to have to do the show alone because I too have to go because I have a zoo at my house.
This will be the shortest show on record, which
it's already been 4 hours, hasn't it?
It's only been an hour and 18 minutes. I don't think we've ever gone under an hour and a half. I mean, that's just unheard of. Are there any other things? Oh, one thing I wanted to talk about, two things really quickly about Las Vegas. I thought Loren was going to tee up the Las Vegas stuff early. Two things that I thought were very interesting. One is Wynn, in response to one of the big issues with Mandalay Bay was this gentleman was able to have 10 suitcases of all these weapons, whatever it is, just an incredible cache of stuff. And questions are getting asked, how did that happen? How could you be allowed to? Wynn Wynn started doing metal detectors and things like that in response to that. So that's going to be a very interesting thing for the hotel industry. I mean, certainly there were lots of things that took place in terms of hotels being soft targets in terms of terrorism and things like that. Of, we're going to go do something very bad at a hotel. But now, because you're a tall, high-rise building, you have all this security. If it's an office building, because you work there, you've got name badges and scanners, and you go through and all this stuff, and that's all fine and good. But hotels, to have the flow of people just going up and back and have fun and not get in their way, that's going to be an interesting thing the hotel industry is going to have to deal with. So.
As you know, it's a huge challenge because hotels are not equipped with one entrance. I mean,
Right. Oh no, with all of that stuff to just, yes, you have to go line up and go through security, and we'll have the equivalent of fast passes and TSA pre-check. That gets really, really ugly for hotels, and that starts playing more in favor of the Airbnb type things and resident. But again, I don't know if apartment buildings wind up having to do that. It's an interesting case. But the other one that I wanted, go ahead.
But here's the other thing. So what's Wynn doing if they're scanning and people are bringing in stuff? I mean, what's their recourse? I mean, I guess I don't know the laws in Vegas. In Arizona, I think you can bring anything you want. You can carry anything you want.
I mean, some are like unlicensed concealed carry thing, right?
Yeah.
There's states like that. It's like, I got this stuff. I don't know. I think, some of the stuff, I think they were, erring on the side of caution, and they may get sued because you're violating, do you confiscate? You have too many guns, or you have that's legal. So where are you from? It's the local law. I didn't know. It's all the stuff the TSA winds up having to deal with, which is, God love the TSA. They got a lot of flack for inconveniencing people, but it's a really hard thing to do because you're flying from point A to point B, connecting. You wind up going outside. You come back in. You can't do and it's like, it's crazy.
A huge challenge.
One thing though, two things. One is the Great Wolf thing that I posted earlier when we were talking a little bit about Great Wolf. They had this great ad campaign because they focus on moms. They had this similar to Disney, kind of a moms group that they talk to, and they're kind of their prime consumer group. But they came up with something that they did. This is one of the most genius ad campaigns I've seen, and it worked very well because they started off doing something for an employee meeting that they put in like little hidden cameras in the cars, and they had this group of moms surprising their kids going to Great Wolf, right? And so they drive in, and where are we going? It's a surprise. And they pull in the park, they see and the kids are going apoplectic.
Oh my gosh!
And
that
you
is
go
brilliant.
from a mom's perspective. I don't think there's any form of, I don't know if you call it adrenaline rush or pride or satisfaction in a job of making their kids that happy.
That's
sort of thing, right? Producing
brilliant.
pure joy for these kids is what they do or try to do, right?
Brilliant.
So they did all that. Anyway, the video that's posted over there is this surprise thing. And it started out just as kind of like a rah-rah thing for their employees to go, hey, look at what we're doing for the guests, which was brilliant in and of itself, just to motivate the employees going, I'm not just here kind of cleaning the pool or whatever is going on, but we are helping families bond and bringing joy to people. And this is true hospitality, right? I mean, the essence of hospitality. Everything. So they did that, and then they went, oh my God, we've got to tell the outside world about this because we can get, but they decided, forget about dads and the kids. Kids are the purpose of it, but it's the moms. If you make the moms happy and give them that dose of that drug, right? And they know where they can get that drug now. They will go back and get more of it, right? So anyway.
Did you see, in a similar vein, and I'm trying to look for it here, did you see the Jackson Hole ad that they did?
No. I love Jackson Hole.
You have to see this. I'm going to look for it, but it's going to take me a minute.
Oh, well, in the meantime, I posted MGM creates it's a new sizzle video.
I love it.
And there are two of them. So I did the before, which was the 2016 version. So you can look at that one, and it's very typical. It's just kind of, yeah, that's good. But yeah, the new one's. Oh, you know what? Do you have should we do 2 minutes? We'll do the 2 minute and 43 second one's a lot better than the 1 minute one. The edit's a lot better. I'm thinking I can share the screen. We've never done this before.
Let's
But I'm
give it a
thinking
shot.
I'm going to try to share a screen, and we can be bold without Loren here. So hang on just a second. Let's see if we can.
I think I just posted the Jackson Hole one too. We should watch that.
Oh, okay. Great. Yeah. This will be the new thing. We just watch video. It'll be like Mystery Science Theater 3000. We'll just have the two little heads talk about what's going on the screen. That's perfect. Okay, so let's try share the screen. Oh, wait a second. I'm going to do something first here. Sorry for the professional quality of this planned, very well edited presentation. So hang on, let's see this. Okay, I'm getting it queued up. I gotta pause it, and let me now go and share on Webinar Jam, share my screen, and say I want to do this, just that. And then if I go to full screen, are you seeing the full screen?
Yes, I
Let's
see
try
us
it.
down in the corner, and there's the ad. This is the new one.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mankind was not.
Can you hear video? Or hear audio?
I hear it like on your computer way in the background.
How's that? Better?
Nope. No sound.
Hang on.
No sound. Are you there still, Robert? There's no sound from you either. Uh-oh, it went away. I might have sensed it away. Are you there? Robert. I think that our experiment failed. I don't think that it worked. Because now I think we've also lost Robert. So I think I'm going to bring a close to the show in record time unless Robert comes back in about 10 seconds. Are you coming back, Robert? I don't think he is. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and end the show. We'll see you next week, where we promise we'll have our act a little bit more together to share these videos. The links you can click on the right, if you open the chat box, you can see the videos that we were talking about and take a look at them. Robert has the before, the older MGM, and then the most recent. And I posted the Jackson Hole, which are two unique approaches, I think. Bye.